So if you're planning a fat loss phase or you're in the middle of one right now, make sure to follow those guidelines once you've hit your fat loss goal. It's so easy to screw this up and just flush weeks and months of effort straight down the drain. What's up guys, Sean Nalawani, RealScienceAthletics.com, and in this video today I want to talk about a scenario that I find very sad and depressing to watch unfold. It's something that I've seen happen roughly 4 million times over the years, and it's a fat loss mistake that a very high percentage of people make, but hopefully by watching this video you will not be one of them. And the tragic fat loss mistake that I'm talking about today is this. It's the person who makes the commitment to lose body fat and get into better shape. They overhaul their previous lifestyle, clean up their diet, put in the work in the gym, stay consistent, track their progress, and ultimately get the result that they were after. So far so good, but the tragic part is that because they don't know how to handle the period of time after they've reached their initial body fat goal, they just end up reverting back in the other direction. And this can happen very quickly, or it can creep up very slowly over time. But in any case, because they don't have a proper post-cutting plan in place, they end up erasing either a good portion of what they achieved or potentially all of what they achieved. And in some more extreme cases, they might end up even worse off than they were at the very start. And this is very depressing for obvious reasons, because all that hard work just gets flushed down the toilet, and it's also a really discouraging thing to go through as well. And this applies both to general fitness beginners, just overweight individuals who are looking to drop a larger amount of body fat, but it also applies to more experienced trainees as well, those who are just doing a typical cutting phase and trying to achieve a leaner physique in general. Now, why does this happen and what can you do to make sure that it doesn't happen to you? Well, I'm gonna go over a few important points here, and I'd strongly suggest watching this all the way through because it could very well make the difference between success and failure with your fat loss program over the long term. So, first off is just sort of a general overall mindset factor that you really need to understand and accept going in. And that is that the same general habits that you followed to lose the fat, those are gonna be the same general habits that you'll need to continue following in order to maintain your results over the long term. This is not about putting in the work, getting the result, and then just letting loose and going back to what you were doing before. If you wanna have a lean, strong, muscular, healthy body, this is something you're gonna be doing for life. Okay, yes, once you've lost the fat, then the calorie deficit ends. So you will be able to increase your food intake and go back to your maintenance calories, and the potential side effects associated with that calorie deficit will gradually subside, but the general overarching habits, those never end. So basing your diet primarily around nutrient-rich, less calorie-dense whole foods, moderating your overall calorie intake. You can definitely still have your treat foods and your treat meals here and there, but you are going to have to moderate it. You need to make sure you're getting in enough protein, that your training program is consistent and on point. This stuff never ends. It's a new way of living that you're permanently adopting. You're not going on a diet and then going off it later on. This is not some kind of 12-week program. It's not a temporary fat loss boot camp. So really hammer that into your mind that you're fundamentally changing your overall lifestyle on a permanent basis. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you're just not ready for this in general. And there's a very good chance that even if you do lose some fat or even all of the fat that you were aiming for, you'll probably still fail and fall off track with this in the longer term. Now, to get a bit more specific and practical, the key thing here is that you need to know how to navigate that initial post-cutting period. There's a sort of sensitive time frame that happens right after you've reached your desired level of leanness that can really make or break you moving forward. And it's a sensitive period because you've been in an ongoing calorie deficit, and as a result of that, your metabolism is going to be down-regulated to a certain degree. So hormones that regulate hunger and energy and fat loss, like leptin, testosterone, T3, those will all decrease to some extent, and so your maintenance calories are going to be lower than they were at the start of your cut. On top of that, your cravings and your appetite are also going to be at their highest. The intensity of that will depend on how long you were in a deficit for, how big the deficit was, and also just how lean you are now. In addition to that, you're also going to have lower levels of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT for short, meaning your body will just be naturally moving around less throughout the day, which is a natural response that your body employs to conserve energy. So you'll be burning fewer calories from that. And since you've put in all that hard work and you've accomplished what you were after, mentally you're also going to be in a position where it'll be very easy to just justify kind of going off the rails because you feel like you deserve it and that you should reward yourself. And rewarding yourself is totally fine to some extent in the short term. Okay, that's fine as long as you can keep it under control. But what happens so often is that people finish their cutting phase and then they just start eating purely based on hunger and cravings. All dietary tracking goes out the window and they just end up going totally overboard. So if you want to maintain your existing body fat moving forward after the deficit has ended and going into the long term, there's a few very important steps that you need to follow here. So first off, forget about slow reverse dieting, which is the idea of slowly increasing your calories from week to week until you get back to maintenance. There's really no point in doing that because if you only increase your calories by small increments of maybe 5 to 10% per week, then you're still gonna be in a net calorie deficit for several more weeks. And if you've already reached your goal body fat percentage, there's no need to stay in a deficit of any kind. Your goal should be to get out of that deficit and get back to maintenance as soon as possible so that you can get your metabolism elevated and bring your hunger and energy back into balance. Remember that your maintenance calories are what it takes to maintain your current weight. And so by definition, you're not going to gain fat by eating at maintenance level. However, the key thing to remember is that because you now weigh less and because you're gonna have that certain degree of metabolic adaptation at play, your maintenance calories at the end of a cut are not gonna be the same as they were when you first started your cut. So you need to increase your food intake in a controlled way to make sure that you don't go excessively high. Now, there's no way to know what your exact maintenance calories are because there's just way too many factors that influence that, and it also fluctuates as well. But the idea here is to just generally estimate. So let's say you finished your cut at roughly a 500 calorie deficit, which would be pretty standard. That would have you losing roughly 1 pound of fat per week since 1 pound of fat contains 3,500 calories in total. In that case, you can just add 500 calories back in. Or if you really don't know what your maintenance level is, then you can also just use a basic body weight multiplier to estimate this. So assuming you're currently within a healthy body fat range now, then something like body weight in pounds multiplied by 15, that will usually get you around the right general level. But again, this is just a rough estimate. The point here is to increase your calories by a moderate, controlled amount that you're still tracking in some capacity so that you can prevent yourself from letting your food intake basically turn into a runaway freight train that you lose total control over, which is something that is very common. So don't increase your calories too slowly or too aggressively. Just add back in a moderate sized chunk straight away that you think represents your general calorie maintenance level. And keep in mind that even if it technically is your calorie maintenance level, you are gonna regain a small bit of weight once you do increase those calories a bit, maybe 2 or 3 pounds or so. And that's because you have more food in your system and you're probably storing more glycogen and more water weight as well. So don't be alarmed if you do put on a small amount of weight pretty quickly because that's totally normal. And then from there, remember that your calorie maintenance level is also a moving target. So like we talked about already, when you eat less, your calorie maintenance level slowly decreases, but the opposite is also true. When you eat more, it slowly increases. So maybe you finish your cut at 2,000 calories and you increase back to 2,500. That doesn't mean that 2,500 calories is now your lifetime maintenance calories and you'll never be able to go above that. It's gonna slowly ramp up as your metabolism re-elevates. So start at 2,500 in that case, but then over time, you can watch the scale, you can track your waist measurement, and then slowly add in more food. And as long as your weight is staying relatively stable, then you can just keep increasing it to basically find the highest calorie intake that you can get away with while keeping your body fat levels in a range that you're happy with. Now, the next point to keep in mind is for those who drop the body fat, they lean down, and now they want to shift into a lean gaining phase and focus on putting on more muscle, which is pretty common. It's honestly rare to get to a point where you say, I'm 100% satisfied with my physique and I just want to maintain it forever. That does happen, but not that often. Very often after a cutting phase is over, you're going to have a new goal and it's usually going to revolve around adding more overall muscle size and strength. But if this isn't done properly, then it can also be a death sentence for your previous fat loss results. And that's because if the goal is now to gain more size, that mental justification for overeating, it just gets exaggerated even further because you're gonna have those higher hunger levels like we just talked about, but now you're telling yourself that you're bulking and that you need the extra calories for building muscle. And that can just very easily send you out of control into basically an unplanned dirty bulk, because most people don't realize how few extra calories it actually takes to build muscle in the first place, which is really not that much. So you might have someone who starts their cutting phase at a maintenance calorie level of, let's say, 3,000 calories. They go down to 2,500 calories to start losing the fat. Then maybe they finish their cut at 2,200 calories. Now they go right back to 3,000 calories thinking that that's their maintenance level since they're not accounting for the adaptations that happen during the cut. And they add maybe 500 calories on top of that for bulking. And so now they're eating 3,500 calories per day when in reality, their actual maintenance calories are maybe something like 2,700 and not 3,000. And they only need 200 extra calories per day to maximize muscle growth and not 500. And so a more suitable intake in that case would actually be something like, maybe 2,900 calories rather than 3,500. So they're eating 600 calories per day more than they actually require. And that's gonna add up very quickly from week to week when you consider that a pound of fat contains about 3,500 calories. So if you finish your cut and now your focus is on gaining muscle, you need to be realistic about what your current calorie maintenance level actually is. It's gonna be lower than it was when you first started. And you need to be realistic about how large of a calorie surplus you actually require to maximize muscle growth, which is probably no more than about 100 to 200 calories above maintenance and around 300 at the most. Okay, you don't need a huge surplus for building muscle, and any excess that you take in beyond what your body can actually utilize for building muscle, that's just gonna be stored as fat. Now, not everyone has to precisely track their exact calorie intake, but I would say that if you're in that post-cutting period and you want to maintain your leanness moving forward, I would say that tracking things to some extent, at least in that initial stage, is probably going to be a good idea for most people. Now, technically, if you're still a novice, then you can make gains by eating just somewhere around maintenance as long as you get in enough protein and your training is on point. But I think that if you've cut down to a relatively lean body fat percentage, let's say 12% give or take, then for optimal gains, I do think a small calorie surplus is gonna be ideal if you want the very best results. Just make sure that you're keeping it under control. So if you're planning a fat loss phase or you're in the middle of one right now, make sure to follow those guidelines once you've hit your fat loss goal. It's so easy to screw this up and just flush weeks and months of effort straight down the drain. But if you follow those simple tips that I just gave and you have some patience, you'll be one of the few people out there who's able to build a lean and muscular body and maintain it over the longer term. If you found this advice helpful and you want to learn step-by-step exactly how to bring all of this together into an actual step-by-step fat burning and muscle building program, so the proper amount of calories you need, the macronutrients, the recommended food choices, along with everything on the weight training and cardio side of things as well, so that you can lose fat and put on muscle as effectively as possible, then make sure to check out my complete body transformation blueprint program over at quiz.seannell.com. That'll get you straight onto the proper path without all the common BS and marketing gimmicks that are so common in the fitness industry nowadays. You can click up here for that or use the link in the description box below. On the supplementation side of things, you can also visit realscienceathletics.com to check out my research-backed, clinically dosed formulas to help fully streamline your program and optimize your overall results. Pairing these products up with the training and nutrition advice found in the body transformation blueprint is basically the guaranteed way to achieve your ideal physique and keep it over the long term. The link for that is also in the description, and you can use coupon code YouTube15 to save 15% off your entire first order. And as always, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already in order to stay in the loop on all of my latest content. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in a few days.